Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear me? When you get a chance, please turn on your cameras if yours is working. Thank you. Can everybody see my slides okay? Yep. Awesome. Thank you. Anybody have any questions about the homework? Either about the submission process or any of the feedback I gave? I believe I'm up to date on grading. So anybody here who has submitted their homework should have gotten feedback already. No questions. Okay. Well, that's good. Welcome everybody to Creative Writing Fundamentals Session 2. Thanks for being on time. I appreciate it. Today we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the core of the class, which is talking about things you should and shouldn't do in creative writing. Before we do that, I think I have a bit of an icebreaker. So usually I like to do a little bit of a check-in just to get everybody talking, get those creative juices flowing. And then we'll talk about red flags and green lights, which are two of the concepts which will be repeated in this class. And then I'll give you guys some time to identify those red flags and green lights and two different pieces of writing. One, which I will show you, and then one, which is the reading from last home. So with that, the icebreaker for today is I want to ask you guys where you see yourself in 10 years. So it can be either something about where you live, it can be something about what you're doing for a living, it can be something that you do for fun. I'm curious if there's something that you think you'll do that's the same as you're currently doing 10 years from now, or something that you've always imagined yourself doing that you haven't gotten a chance to do. So take a chance to think about this. Alrighty. Jack, do you want to share first? College. Okay. Anything more specific? Like what kind of college? Where? What do you want to study? What do you think you'll be doing? Okay, UCLA maybe? Okay, well, if you think of anything else, do put it in the chat. Gianna, do you want to go next? Okay, so Anna is being ambitious. So maybe an Ivy League college, majoring in English. We'd love to hear that. Cool. And then Rafi. Okay, Rafi also says college. I was hoping you guys would be a little more creative and maybe you have, I don't know, a pet. Maybe there's something you've always wanted to do that you can't do when you're at home. Um, but that's okay. College is a perfectly acceptable answer, and I think also probably an accurate one. So great. Let's see. So today we're going to talk about red flags. And before I tell you what a red flag is, I want to ask you guys if you have ever heard of the term, maybe not just for writing, but red flags in general. Or maybe when I say the words red flag, what comes to your mind? What's something that you think of? So what do you think a red flag is, maybe? Yeah, so Jana says something considered bad writing. Okay. Anybody else with a guess? So I think Jana's on the right track. Um, and so with that, can you come up with something that you think using that definition is a red flag? So what do you think are different traits of something that you would consider poor writing? Yeah, so Rafi says story doesn't stay good. So maybe it's disorganized, right? Or there's no, or incoherent. What else? Jack, do you have any ideas? Rushed. Okay, what do you mean by rushed? Or I guess I assume you mean by you feel like the writing was done rushed. But what are some giveaways that make you feel like writing was rushed? Okay, so some parts aren't explained well. What else? You guys can't come up with any more red flags? I'm sure there are a lot of different things that maybe you open a book and you read and you're like, oh, that's not good. Or maybe think about what I like to do is I like to think about, let's say I went and read my old writing from, I don't know, when I was in elementary school. What are some things that you'd be like, oh, that's not good? Spelling, yeah, so bad spelling, so misspelling, I should say. That's a good one. There are a lot more along that, I think, related to that, not related to that. There are a lot of different red flags still. Let me help you guys out. Now we'll take a peek at the whole list. So I have a list of 8 red flags. Like Gianna said, these red flags are things that I am trying to get you guys to avoid doing in your writing. And I think by removing each of these when you go through your homework, you will automatically improve the level of your writing, maybe by a single point or 2 on the grade scale, which is pretty good. So we'll start off with the first one, which is cliches. Anybody here know what a cliche is? Too obvious? Okay, maybe. Can somebody give me an example of what a cliche is? Like, give me a typical cliche. Yeah, so maybe love at first sight. There are a lot of other ones, right? Maybe like happily ever after. Um, I don't know. There's a lot of them. Tortoise in the hare. But pretty much a cliche is like an overused sentence phrasing or plot structure. So it can be either or. So one of these is plot structure, right? So the one I suggest, happily ever after, or once upon a time, or it was a dark and stormy night. Pretty much the problem with these is that if the reader can finish their own your sentence without even reading it, then you've probably got a cliche because it's too obvious, right? You should try to avoid these because it makes your writing boring. It doesn't really say anything because cliches have been used so much, nobody really knows what they actually mean anymore. So that's the first red flag that we have. The second, like you guys alluded to, is grammar mistakes. So these are easily preventable. You guys are all smart. If you just proofread your writing, especially in your homework, you should be able to catch most of these, right? So some of the easy ones to catch are misspelling. That one's super easy because if you write your homework in Google Docs or something, Google Docs will tell you typically when you misspell something. But there are also some grammar mistakes that you guys make that are harder to catch. So ones that I see all the time are like mixed up verb tenses. So sometimes your subject and verb won't agree in number. Some of you guys will also just like randomly switch tenses in the homework. So you guys will go from past tense to present and then back, and then it's very confusing for the reader. You guys will also sometimes have run-on sentences, right? So remember that sentences need to be different independent clauses need to be joined by a comma and coordinating conjunction. Don't just combine 2 independent clauses with a comma. That's called a comma slice. There's also pronouns without antecedents. You guys do this all the time, which is like sometimes they'll say it was good, but it's not clear to me whether it was, the direct object of the last sentence or the subject of the last sentence. So make sure you correct your grammar mistakes, not just for this class, but also for writing in other classes, because it's one of those things, like you guys said, when you read writing, even if it's good writing, if there's misspelling in it, you're going to judge it harshly, right? So that's that. Number 3 is repetition, or I should say specifically redundancy, or using the same words over and over again. I don't think I need to tell you why this is bad, right? Redundancy is boring to read. For example, the last homework, if you use the word the orangutan, it becomes very drab very easily. So try to come up with new ways to say things or talk about other things that will help improve your writing a great deal. Number 4 is adverbs. This is one that all of you guys, I think, could learn something from. So an adverb is a word that describes a verb or an adjective, right? So the ones we're talking about here are the ones that end in ly, so slowly or quickly. An example I have is Derek ran quickly. And the reason some adverbs are bad, like this one, is because you can replace it with a more vivid verb, right? So Derek sprinted. I have a little picture on the next slide, I think, about good adverbs and bad adverbs. So it says, to understand the difference between a good adverb and a bad adverb, consider she smiled happily and she smiled sadly. The first one is weak because smiled already means, typically, when you think of someone smiling, they're happy. On the other hand, sadly changes the meaning. And so it talks about killing me softly, killing me fiercely. And you want to use weak, you want to avoid weak verb adverb combinations and replace them with either a good adverb that modifies the verb or just a better verb altogether. So instead of she went quickly, you can use she dashed. Instead of he listened surreptitiously, you can say he eavesdropped. Does that make sense? Anybody have any questions about this? Cool. Moving on, number 5 is one that you guys also use a lot. So forms of the verb to be is, are, was, were, has, had. There are, I think, 2 or 3 reasons why these are not good or why you want to avoid them. One is that they can typically be replaced by stronger verbs, right? So if you just said he was sad or something like that, you can usually say he frowned, but there's usually an active verb in there. Which brings me to the second point, which is that these are typically used for passive voice. We want to try to write an active voice as much as possible, right? So instead of the book was lifted by him, we want to write he lifted the book. We want subjects to be doing the actions of the verbs and not vice versa. And then finally, a lot of you guys do this one too, which is that you guys complicate your verb tenses. You guys should strive to write all your homework in simple present or simple past tense. If you guys find yourselves using all sorts of he would do this or he was fixing, just use the simple past. Just say he fixed or he did this, right? There's no need to complicate things with past progressive, habitual past, all these different tenses. Number 6 is he looks, he feels, he sees, or he smells. So verbs of perception. So these are bad because you can almost always rewrite the sentence to just remove that layer between us or the person perceiving these things. If you just describe what something is, then the reader can feel it for themselves, right? So the example I have is he feels the rain dripping onto his boot. Instead, you could just say rain drips onto his boot or rain dripped onto his boot. You don't need to put the character in between us and what's happening. Just describe what's happening to the character. Number 7 is crutch verbs. So telling verbs that extend a sentence without conjuring a concrete image. So causing, creating, resulting, forming, making, there's all sorts of these verbs. Just make sure that the verbs you're using are verbs that we can picture. So concrete verbs, right? That we could act out. And then finally, unnecessary adjectives. Some of you guys said stuff like this. With the orangutan, you said like he sits down on a cold, hard rock. Nobody needs to know that a rock is hard. All rocks are hard. So don't use adverbs that or adjectives, just like with the adverbs. Don't use adjectives that you wouldn't already assume of the noun. That makes sense? Anybody have any questions about these? Cool. So we will do an activity with these later. Hopefully you guys got these down. So now I'm going to flip it over. We just talked about red flags, right? So red flags are things that we don't want to do in our writing because people will read them and it'll automatically lower the level of our writing. I want to flip it over and talk about green lights now. So what do you think green lights are? And can you come up with any examples? Feel free to put your guesses in the chat. Nobody has any guesses for what they think something that you read and you're like, okay, that's good. Or like good things that you want to do in your writing. Consistency, okay. Jack, what do you mean by consistency? Okay, and this is show not tell. That's a good one. What else? Think about things maybe you've learned in English class, things you've learned from reading books that you like, things that you think when you write yourself. So what are some things you're looking out for or trying to do when you're writing by yourself? No more guesses. Okay. Switching words. I'm not sure what that means. But we can take a peek at the list. Any good piece of literature uses alliteration. That's a bold statement. But using poetic devices like alliteration could be good. I won't say every single piece of literature, good literature uses it, but I think it's good to use poetic devices. By switching words, Jack means not using the same words. That is good. So avoiding redundancy, right? Cool. That's a good list. We're finally starting to get somewhere. So let's take a look at the list that I have for you guys. So number one, John already said this one, which is sensory details, right? We want to try to show, not tell. We want to write things that appeal to the five senses. Number two is sort of the opposite of a cliche. So instead of something that's overused, use an unusual noun verb pairing. So maybe mixing a verb that's typically used to describe some sort of sight, something you see with something that you hear, right? So light dripping or water hissing. An opposite of that would be something like drug beating. If anybody else could come up with the same verb for your subject, probably not that unusual. Number 3 is motifs. So anybody know what a motif is here? You guys learned about it in school. A theme, okay. Close. A motif is a repeated image. It's not just something or symbol or something like that. But it's not just something that we have in writing. There are motifs in music as well as in movies and film. And they all sort of have, motifs have the same meaning in pretty much all of these, which is something that just gets repeated. And the reason these are good is because when you repeat things, they stick in people's brains, and then it becomes more interesting the more you hear. They add layers of meaning. So an example of this is if you guys have read Harry Potter, maybe like the Horcruxes in Harry Potter, right? Or if you like the Hunger Games, like the sounds they make when the tributes die. All these different things can be motifs. So they get repeated and they accrue meaning through time. And they sort of like, every time you repeat a motif, it sort of links that motif with all the other times it's represented in the story, right? And so by that, you can sort of tie different parts of the story together. So they're a great tool to use. What else? Number 4 is flow patterns or poetic devices. So Gianna already mentioned alliteration. We have some other ones, right? So metaphors and similes, personification, onomatopoeia, rhyme. You guys could go on forever with these. There are a lot of poetic devices, but in general, using these and using them well is a hallmark of good writing. Not to say that using a simile automatically makes your language better than other not using it, but if you use them well, they can elevate the level of your writing. I think they should be sort of treated like spices, in that you don't want your entire dish to be spiced, but adding a little bit of spice, you done right, will go a long way. And then finally, I have unique sentence structures. So you can vary your sentences by length, right? But you can also vary them based on the position of the subjects and verbs, right? And all these different clauses. The reason for this being that it's boring to read the same kind of sentences over and over. And so it's important to sort of vary the length, vary the way the words are coming at the reader, so that the reader doesn't get bored. Any questions about any of these? Okay. So what we're going to do now is I have a short example paragraph, and I want you guys to think about red flags and green lights. So I want everybody to come up with one red flag or green light that they want to share and put in the chat. And if somebody else has already put in the chat, then you can't use it. So, and make sure you have the words that come with it. So maybe you're like, okay, well, this is this. Does that make sense? Oh, I mean, in this paragraph, if that wasn't clear. Just remember to put your answers in the chat. Let's see, decorates the wood of the tree stump is a red flag. Because you can assume that the tree stump has wood. I can see that. I don't really like the verb decorates. And I think you could also just say decorates the tree stump. So agreed. You think of a green light too? Rafi and Jack, do you guys have any ideas? Okay, so Rafi says water collides against the leaf could be phrased differently. How would you phrase it? Okay, let's see. So Jack says using it as a shield. It's a green flag, green light. Yeah, I would agree. I think this is a good simile. Water sprinkled the leaf may be better. Okay, I don't feel like one is better than the other, but that is a way to rewrite it. Cool. Well, hopefully you guys have sort of gotten an idea of what I'm looking for when we're pointing out red flag and green lights. So let's change gears now and we'll take a look at the reading from the homework, which is paper planes. I have pasted the text in our class document, which I will share the link with you. I'll put in the chat. So what I want you guys to do is to mark it up with by commenting. So you can either what I want you guys to do is to highlight something and then use the comment function and then go like red because, and then I want you to talk about this is how it affects the experience. So not just this is just a red flag. What red flag is it? And then what? How does it affect the reading experience? So if it's a green light, do you feel like it makes your reading experience more interesting? Okay, I see somebody has gotten access to the document, so hopefully you guys can get on. So I'll give you about maybe 10 minutes to do this, and then after 10 minutes, I'll ask you guys to share what you found. So just a reminder to not just identify a green light or a red flag, but also talk about how it affects your reading experience. So instead of, this is a simile, does the simile help you see what it is better? Because there are good similes and there are bad similes. Okay, everybody ready? Or anybody need more time? All right, what I'm going to do now is go through. Normally, I would ask you guys to share, but I don't think anybody's microphone is working. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and read your comments. So I am surprised we did not come up with some more red flags and green. Sorry, red flags and green lights. There are a lot of great ones in this first section that nobody really pointed out at. But there's some great sensory details here, some great verbs, some very specific, concrete details and names that nobody said anything about. Let's see. There's some sentence variation in structure, right? So we have short sentences, long sentences, and builds a good flow. So Gianna pointed out this sentence, which is Satan wasn't a classmate, but an object of amusement, like the wild monkeys they would throw rocks at. So it's a simile. I agree that I think it helps sort of like compare. I think the point of the simile is it like compares the boys to animals, and so it sort of like reemphasizes or like reinforces how unempathetic, how unkind they are to their classmate Satan. What else? The plane slid off of their fingers and drifted like a flock of swans over the dew-tipped maple trees outside the schoolyard. Yeah, I think this is a very poetic, a very descriptive use of simile as well as descriptive language. So I think this is a great example of a green light. Craning the neck. There's some intentional flow patterns here. So she shielded her plane. She pivoted toward the fence. She gazed up at the clear sky. So she's using the same sentence structure intentionally and creating a sort of like poetic rhythm with that, which is a green light, right? Let's see. Satan's plane did not go through the fence. Instead, she pushed it through the fence and said it made through the fence. This leaves a mixed feeling about the protagonist as she is bullied, which makes her feel bad as she cheats her way into a chance in the club. That's really interesting. I think this is a really interesting point. I don't think she's like, I guess that's one way to interpret it. But I think like the fact that they don't let her into the club anyway, sort of like defeats that point. But it's interesting that you pointed out. I don't know if it is one of the red flags that I outlined in the list, but I really like that you pointed that out. It's a different interpretation of the story for sure. The way I see it is like not so much that she cheated, which maybe she did based on the rules, but that it illustrates how badly she wanted to be accepted or in the club, right? Let's see. So stranded and alone are synonyms. So I don't think it's necessary that both the words make the story run a lot smoother when you read it. Yeah, I agree. I think the definition of these two words could overlap, but I also think it sounds better having both. So it's good that you're thinking about these things. These are the kind of conversations you should have when you're reading your own writing as well. And then finally, for a moment, he considered socking Theme right in the stomach, but decided the attack would be a waste of energy. And so he swiftly turned around and disappeared into the massive void. And yeah, I think the vivid verb socking, as well as the fact that he like doesn't even think that she's worth his energy, is a great way to convey the Takara's disdain for Satan. So great job, everybody, with this. The goal of this activity was to get you guys to sort of start thinking about your writing and other people's writing in terms of these red flags and green lights. And so my hope is that for the next homework, which is another picture paragraph. So it'll be this paragraph to get you guys to write it and then try to edit out all the different red flags you can think of and then replace them with green lights. So the homework is the same, write a little short paragraph describing this picture. Some of you guys took some more creative liberties and like made up a whole story, which is like great for creativity. But for the first couple homeworks, I want you to focus on writing what's in the picture. So describe to me what is in the picture so that I could draw it, picture it in my head without even looking at the photograph. So I want you to hone your showing versus telling skills. And it's just like last homework, I also want you to read Enchanting Emeralds by Eric Lee and be ready to analyze it or annotate it in class. Anybody have any questions about the homework, the activity, what the different green lights and red flags are? No? If not, then I will see you on Sunday. So your homework is due the night before class. So it is due Saturday night. And yeah, otherwise I will see you on Sunday. So good luck with your homework and have a good weekend.